Joining me now, as he does every Monday, is best-selling author of The War on the West, Douglas Murray. Douglas, plenty to get through today, and I want to start with what centre-right politicians in Australia and the UK could learn from the success of the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. He has just really seized the opportunity in defending traditional values.
He has. As you know, Rita, the big question around the upcoming American election, the presidential election in 2024 is, will Donald Trump run or won't he? And everyone pretty much agrees by now that he'll run if he thinks he can get the nomination and then win. And if he doesn't think that, then he won't run. The main challenger at the moment is Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who is now on an even pegging with Donald Trump among Republican voters. And in some polls, is actually shown superseding Donald Trump in the polls among Republican voters. And this is very interesting. Ron DeSantis is rather disturbingly, for me, almost exactly my own age. He's wildly accomplished, over-accomplished. He's been an extraordinary governor of Florida. He, of course, took the very difficult, but in the end, vindicated decision to not shut Florida down during the pandemic of 2020. That was a very bold decision, but actually Florida didn't have a death rate, wildly disproportionate once you take in age of population and much more. Florida, therefore, has actually boomed in the last couple of years when most of the rest of the world has been a kind of stagnation at best. But of course, Ron DeSantis has also had other victories. He stood up to woke corporate. He stood up for traditional values in schooling. He stood up against gender nonsense being taught in the classrooms and being told that everyone has got 1,000 genders and they're growing by the minute. And there are various other things he's done like that. He stood up against critical race theory. And I think this is very interesting. We talked last week, among other things, about Kemi Badenoch in the UK. Very talented young politician, also a young politician, certainly by American standards. But this one in the UK, Kemi Badenoch, who also has stood up for just some traditional common sense ideas and has also seen an enormous surge in popularity. So I think, yes, you're right, Rita, there is something that must be learned from this. In Australia, apart from anything else.
I live in hope, but our politicians, the Conservative ones here, seem just not to have the courage to seize these opportunities and stand up for values of at least half the population. And Ron DeSantis, his political instincts are very similar to Trump. He's more polished, more astute, probably, than Trump, but his political instincts, you would say, mirror the former president's.
They do in certain ways, yes. And I think really the reason why there's a sort of growing feeling for DeSantis is he doesn't come with all the baggage that Donald Trump by this point certainly does come with. I mean, I think that if Donald Trump does win the Republican nomination, you'll see a very, very mobilized Democrat vote in 2024. So there's a sort of hope, I think, among some Republicans that perhaps people could say to Donald Trump, to the extent you did, some good, we acknowledge that, we thank you for that, but it's time to move on with a new generation. After all, and as we've discussed before, Rita, the next generation would be fought between somebody approaching 80 and somebody over the age of 80. And at some point, the octogenarians have got to let their grip on power go. But you're right, Rita, one quick point on this about Australia in particular. You say the opportunity, and exactly, it's an opportunity. It's not like any of these sort of common sense ideas that we all believed till yesterday are sort of wildly fringe. I mean, they are fringe in parts of the media, as we know. They are fringe in parts of the sort of chattering classes. But most of the general public agree with this stuff. It's just a lack of guts and leadership, I'm afraid, among a lot of conservative leaders across the Western world.
Absolutely. Now, we in Australia are no strangers to China's aggression, its use of threats and economic coercion, but you'd think the US would be too big, too powerful to be bullied. But as you wrote in the New York Post, it's not clear right now who runs US foreign policy. Is it the White House? Is it the State Department? Or is it the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, as you say, Rita, I mean, Australia has been a kind of ground zero for this in the last couple of decades, hasn't it? Because Australia has had to learn very fast some of the lessons that the rest of the West has been learning very slowly about China and the Chinese Communist Party and its bullying on the global stage. But one particular thing that happened this week that struck me that I mentioned in that piece on the New York Post, and that was a spokesperson for the Chinese Communist Party warning Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the Democrat Speaker of the House, not to lead a congressional delegation to Taiwan, saying that she would regret doing such a thing and that there would be consequences. But here's the thing, Rita, as you know, I mean, Taiwan is a sovereign country. It's an independent country. The Chinese Communist Party may think that it's part of China, but it ain't. Now, the question for America at this point is, are you really going to allow, are Democrats, Republicans, anyone else, going to allow the Chinese Communist Party to tell elected representatives in America where they can and cannot go? I very much hope not. But this is the sort of bullying that the CCP has done against Australian officials. It's the sort of bullying they did 10 years ago against British officials with the Dalai Lama affair, where they cut off trade talks with the UK simply because the then Prime Minister David Cameron met with the Dalai Lama. This is the sort of thing which they tried to do to bully countries like Australia, countries like Britain. Will they succeed in bullying the world's superpower? An awful lot is going to depend upon that answer.
It's going to be crucially important for Nancy Pelosi to be in Taiwan at some point in the next few months.
I say go now and go often.
Would be
go now and go often. Go early and often.
Good advice there. Now, I just want to bring to your attention this bizarre footage that came to light over the weekend of Boris Johnson throwing a grenade while training with Ukrainian troops in North Yorkshire. Let's have a look.
What we're going to do now is then breach and make entry.
Douglas, I've got one question. Why?
Well, first of all, I mean, I still have some residual liking for Boris Johnson, but I would trust him with a hand grenade about last of anyone who I've ever met. If anyone were to go, pull the pin and then I hold it for a bit, what is that? Then it would be Boris. I think I would not trust him. I would not trust him to throw a grenade. Anyhow, no, I mean, I thought it was slightly risible and, frankly, to tell the truth, Rita, slightly pathetic. I'll tell you why. Boris Johnson's great hero, who he doesn't ever mind there being comparisons made between him and, is Winston Churchill. Boris Johnson he even wrote a book resiling from the comparison being made. Look, here's the thing. Boris Johnson really wanted to be a historic Churchill-like figure. And the truth is that with the exception of getting Britain out of the EU, he wasted his time in office. He wasted it. He didn't do what his great hero did. The hour didn't come, you might say, but whatever it was, Boris was tested and he wasted his time. It's almost like a sort of Greek tragedy without all of the blood and gore. But with Ukraine, Boris Johnson saw the opportunity for that Churchillian ring to start to occur, for the comparisons to be able to be made. And I'm afraid when I saw this footage, I thought, it's a sort of, as a millennial might say, it's Boris Johnson cosplaying Winston Churchill. And I think it's slightly sad. I wish he hadn't done it. And I think there are more graceful ways to go out. For the moment, though, Ukraine, weirdly, is Boris Johnson's happy place. He did help lead the Western Alliance in this. He did do something. It is important. He shouldn't overdo it. He's not Winston Churchill.
No, he is not. And lastly, Douglas, I was surprised to see the hashtag Meghan Markle bullies children pop up last night on Twitter. And it seems to be all due to this new book, Revenge, by Tom Bauer, where he claims Meghan did indeed make Kate cry. And it was due to her criticism of little Princess Charlotte's dress that she was going to wear for Meghan's wedding. Now, we're talking here about a, 3 or 4-year-old child at the time. Surely she can't be that awful, can she?
Well, I think Tom Bauer's book says apparently she is. Most people in the public eye, by the way, there's one thing they really shouldn't want, and that's for Tom Bauer to write a book about them. He is a fearsome investigative journalist. He has an extraordinary track record. He's done over a whole bunch of villains and borderline villains. This book has been causing a lot of waves because he's done his work. He's done his interviews. He says that some friends of Meghan didn't want to speak to him, but he's spoken to an awful lot of people, and he's got the truth out. And what we're really hearing is the other side of some of the stories we've only heard one side of. This row between Kate Middleton and Meghan had been mentioned before. Meghan had mentioned it in her Oprah interview, that famous grilling that Meghan got at the hands of Oprah Winfrey last year. Meghan mentioned it, then she said Kate did do something, but it didn't matter. She owned it, and she even apologized and gave me flowers. Stuff like. Now we're hearing the other side of the story, which turns out that well, Prince William's child was apparently being bullied by Meghan. So it's not a great look once again for Meghan Markle, but I'm sure she'll find a way to come out of it smelling of roses and accusing everybody else of racism, homophobia, misogyny, and some other vices that she'll think of between now and then.
Absolutely. If we've learned anything from those two, Meghan and Harry, is that they can play the victim better than anybody in the world's most privileged victims. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It's a great pleasure as always.